Anyway, man, that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my passion. So I appreciate you for joining the podcast, man. I'm really excited to speak with you. I'm a big fan of the company. One thing I wanted to start off with, well, first, go ahead and introduce yourself and let everyone know what company you're with and what you do for a living.
My name is Micah Truman. I am the CEO of Return Home. We are a Terramation, a body composting company. I started the company. Sorry, I have an automatic off switch.
No worries.
I'll start.
No worries.
I started the company in January of 2019. It took us 2.5 years to develop our science and our machinery, our technology, and to outfit our warehouse, our facility. And we opened in June of 2021. We have been open just over a couple years, 2 years, and we've helped almost 250 families from 21 states across America and 3 provinces in Canada.
That's awesome, man. One of the things I enjoyed on your website, and it really touched home with me, is this quote. I guess it's your quote. It says, "It is our great privilege to ensure that our last act on this planet is to give back to it." I love that. And I guess, can you expand on that? Like, what did you mean by that?
I mean, our life is led. We do what we do. I'm sure you look back and there's things you're proud of and maybe other things you're not as proud of. And I'm sure I am very much the same, and many of us are. But there's no doubt that when we die, the last act that I think many of us hope is one of gratitude and of generosity. But let's make it count at the very end. And we're very excited that at Return Home, that's something we let people do. And it means an enormous amount to me. And it means an enormous amount to an incredible number of people. So it's been fairly amazing.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Signature Touch. Signature Touch is veteran-owned and operated, and it was started by my wife and myself with a mission to provide the highest quality, all-natural skincare products made from ethically sourced ingredients. We have body butters, lip balms, and deodorants, and the best part is you could use it on yourself, and they're safe for everyone in the family, including your children. My wife's favorite body butter is Bernilla. It's made with bergamot and vanilla botanical extract. People say it smells like key lime pie. My favorite is Lavensense. It's made with lavender essential oil and frankincense. It makes your skin feel so nourished, but it's also good on bug bites and rashes. Check us out today. The website is oursignaturetouch.com. Use code JLA to receive 10% off your first purchase. The website, it's oursignaturetouch.com. The idea of terramation and natural burial, has that picked up steam? I think it's been a couple of months since I last spoke with Bree, but is it becoming more widely adopted? It's odd to even say that it's not legal in some states, but are y'all gaining more traction in that space?
I mean, and again, I'd mentioned earlier, but I can say, we will be on Shark Tank on October 6th at 8 p.m. on ABC. They wouldn't be taking companies like ours if they didn't believe that there was a groundswell of support for them. We started the company when Washington was legal and the only place on the planet that allowed it. We've now got 7 states that include California and New York that have both legalized. We're looking at legalization sweeping the United States now. The big states. You've got Illinois coming in, of course, with Chicago. You've got Massachusetts coming close with Boston. So very soon, I think we will have the top 10 cities in the United States pretty much locked. And I'm talking about in the next 12 months. So wow. This is going to be an absolute tidal wave.
That is awesome. So I imagine you're on the forefront on a lot of those conversations. Are you having to persuade people, give them data? How are those conversations going?
I think people often pretend or think that they're very data driven. And I think really what we are is emotionally driven. And what we're talking about here is dying, is death. Dude, can't we not? How about those Seahawks? And we think about it from a consumer point of view. Oh, consumers don't want to talk about it. That's true. Neither do priests and neither do legislators. We're all human beings and none of us want to do it. So legislation gets difficult if the conversation is difficult to have. If we can't have it at home, we can't have it in our Senate chambers. We can't have it in our churches. And so I think it's really the greatest barrier is not a data problem. It's an issue that we fundamentally in this Judeo-Christian country believe that if we don't talk about death and dying, it might not happen to us. And that we can't seem to shake. But again, it's improving. And our younger generation has it way better than our older one.
Yeah, man, the younger generations, they're a lot more accepting to new ideas and even ancient wisdom that was practiced well before our time. It seems like they're bringing a lot of that stuff back.
I think it's ironic as we look at it that our younger generation is teaching our older one how to die better. And I thought it was always the role in our society of our elders to do that. In this case, it's absolutely upside down and backwards. And I really do think it's our youth that's teaching our older generations what needs to be done when we go back to the earth. And that's both beautiful and sad. I guess it cuts both ways.
Yeah. What do you mean by die better? What do you mean by that?
We as a culture have been acculturated to two disposition methods, burial and cremation. Burial, typically in America, take a body, drain the blood out of it, pour it down a sink, fill that body with formaldehyde, with embalming fluid, paint that body, put it on display, put it in a coffin, gasketed, put that coffin in a cement and rebar lined hole in a cemetery that is legally protected from anything ever being done with it ever again, so long as our republic survives. There's burial. Cremation. We take a body, we put it in an incinerator, we run it at 1600 degrees, the fat runs down the side, goes into a nice collection cup at the bottom. Once the body is completely incinerated, and all the things that the body could give the earth is blown straight into the air as greenhouse gas, take the remaining bones, put them in what we call a cremulator, which is a blender, and put those crushed bones into a plastic bag, give them back to the family as ash, and that is their memento. If you look at both those solutions somewhat at a distance, in a sort of clear, reasoned way, we realize that's a little wild, right? Because when we think about it, since ever, for millions of years, we've taken our loved one and cared for them and wrapped them in something and placed them in a tree or in the ground, and they go back to the earth, and that's the way it's done. So why are we broken? The people, Americans, have only seen cremation and burial, as did their parents, as did their parents' parents. And these are not ways, A, that are kind to the earth, but also they're not kind to our heart, right? How many times have you talked to a person who remembers being a child, walking in to see their dad painted in a casket, right? When I hear that story, whenever someone tells me, oh, my father died when I was young and I went to the funeral home, I know what the next answer is going to be, right? It's not going to be, I went to the funeral home and he was there in his casket and it was just the most beautiful feeling in my heart. It's not usually how the story goes. What we find is we lose our person and they die, and that hurts. And it could have been hard or beautiful or both. But then people come in, grab them, put them in a plastic bag, and do what they will. And we wonder why we're so brokenhearted. And that's because we're not doing things that in any way match what we as human beings are built to do, in every sense. But after 150 years, we don't even know that's the case. It's kind of the Truman Show.
Yeah.
We just live in that reality and wonder why it hurts so darn bad.
It almost feels like we're close in the current way that we bury people. The act of us all getting together, the celebration of life that usually takes place afterwards. But you're right, it's that moment when you go into the church or wherever you're going to, and you see this made up body and these clothes. It's just not a natural feeling that I've ever gotten when I've experienced a family member that's passed away.
No. And, I'm a father. I have kids, right? I was in the delivery room with my wife. I mean, it wasn't always that way, but, it does in my generation and in subsequent ones. And I was grateful to be there, to be with my wife and my kids when they came. But, we have the exact same instinct in us when our people go, right? But we're never present because professionals need to do that. But if you think about it, like take your hardest scenario, think about me losing my son. If that's my last time with my son, I don't want a stranger to take him. I don't want a stranger to do things that I can't see. I want to be there and I want to be part of that. A, I didn't know that before I started. But B, even saying that, most people will be, that's weird. But is it? It's just that we're so divorced from the things that matter to us that we actually think being with our people when they go is morbid or weird.
Yeah.
And that, my friend, is weird.
Well, oh God, you bring up another topic of birth, how divorced we are from natural birthing. More and more women are starting to, at least on my Instagram feed, I'm starting to see more and more women do natural birthing. And I didn't even think like to put the two together. It's a similar situation. We're wanting to get back to the roots.
I agree. I think we want our arms around our people. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, like guns or don't. We love our families. We love our friends. We want to be next to them and with them. And if we're putting things in place that distance us, that hide things from us, that don't let us be with our people at critical times, we suffer. And we don't even know half the time we suffer, but we do. And I think that's why we're doing all these things. That's why we're sitting with our wife when they're having a baby and our, mother when they die. We weren't meant to suffer alone. We're herd animals. We weren't meant to die alone. We weren't meant to grieve alone. We're literally not built for it. Yet we've built these systems that let us sit there like little rhinoceri on the Serengeti, marching alone, eating our snacks. But we're wildebeest, man. We're not built for this. And we need to change.
Where did the idea of return home come from?
In the very beginning, Washington State was the first place on the planet to legalize terramation. And I was sitting with my mother. I worked in finance previously. And I saw the article and I was with, Ma, and she had two of her friends, like, 3 Jewish guys sitting at the table eating breakfast. And they were from New York. And I was like, Ma, look at this. This is wild. And she's like, that's not wild. Like, I'd do that. And I was like, okay. And her two buddies were like, yeah, we're from New York. Can you get our bodies here? Because we do that too. And I don't know, it stuck in my head. That's not your normal conversation with 3 80-year-old people. And once it's there, your listeners are going to see the same thing. They'll like it or dislike it. They'll do whatever they do. But it's in their head rent-free and it won't leave. And in my case, it was like, holy cow, like, is this even like for real? And then I realized this is an opportunity to build a company that the bigger it gets, the better off the world is for it. Absolutely no bullshit. Like, truly, right? Look, we have two kinds of companies that often try this environmental angle, right? We have companies that hand knit fair trade socks in a small third world developing nation. They're lovely socks. I'm sure it helps the village. They sell 14 pairs a year. There we are. Lovely idea, horrible business. And then you've got businesses that are extracting resources from the earth on scales unimaginable. And they do advertisements of beautiful young people in beautiful spots explaining why the job they do is the most fulfilling environmental endeavor that they've ever done in their life. And that's a bald-faced lie, but it's an amazing business. So which one, right? The great business, the environmental, the environmental business that's a wonderful thing and a terrible business, or the phenomenal business that's a greenwashed piece of garbage? And finally, we're able to square that. And the answer is yes, we're both. And that just grabbed me, and I haven't been able to let go.
What were the first steps? Like, how did you put this together? Because you said your background was in finance, so you had no previous experience in cemeteries or death or soil, how to convert bodies into soil. So how did you go about tackling all that?
Ooh, we're having a little bit of latency here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, and I think I understood your question, but it did get choppy, but I think I can answer it.
Okay.
Actually, no, do it one more time. Let's start one more time and make sure I get it right.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned your background was in finance. So I imagine you had no experience in, bodies, death, and cemeteries, and soil, converting bodies into soil. So how did you go about putting the team together to tackle all that?
Yeah. My background, what I know how to do is to build and scale companies. So that was a skill set that I have. So for me, it became an exercise in how do I get that Ocean's 11 team that can take a body and transform it into soil. And so that was fun. So the first group that I found were this wild crew called Mortality Composters. And they're like, like Pulp Fiction, like Mr. Wolf, right?
Yeah.
Like, blood, gore, guts splattered all over the house and he can make it all better. These guys, let's say you're a farmer and you have 400 pigs that are either dead instantly for some reason or need to be. Happens all the time in agriculture. These guys are the ones who come onto your land, set up temporary facilities, and transform your livestock into soil. It's a very elegant solution. The science is incredibly dialed, and it's largely, interestingly, a red state play, which I think is fascinating and speaks to the fact that actually, the left and Democrats, we don't have a lock on morality or doing the right thing by any stretch. The problem. So I go to these mortality composters, like, yeah, man, we got this. We're going to take the bodies and we're going to stack them in a ziggurat formation. Boom, 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 right? We're going to cover them in whatever nitrogen-rich chicken poop or whatever it is. We're going to put thick layers of insulation like sawdust, run some air through, and Bob's your uncle. We got this, And I was like, how about we don't? How about that's really not how it's going to go? And what we realized is they had an incredibly dialed and mature science, but it wasn't set up such that it showed care and love for other human beings. And that became the journey. How do we take and port that science into a form that really can work for someone who's lost their mother, their wife, God forbid, their kid? And that took 2.5 years.
Wow.
And then, but it involved adding an incredible team. So let's see. Mortality composters, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, funeral directors, death doulas, electricians, general contractors, architects, machinists, fabricators, and they all had to talk to each other because no one knew what the other guy needed, right? So the classic example was I brought Bree in, who and I was super excited. And I'm like, look, I got this facility. We're putting $3 million into it. It's going to be whiz bang. And I'm pointing at all these spaces. And she goes, great, man. I love this job. I think I'll take it. Where's the prep room? And I'm like, what's a prep room? Right? And she's like, where you take a body and clean it and make sure they're as beautiful as they can so their family can see them. And I'm like, right? So there I am building this facility and not knowing where a prep room is. So it's an example of bringing a really disparate, brilliant group of people together to work on a commonly held brand new problem. And it was freaking magic.
Isn't it fascinating that the predominantly Democratic states are the ones adopting this method first? I would almost consider it to be a right-wing thing.
I actually thought that this was going to be a Democratic tree hugger type disposition. I thought that the legislatures would do that first. The first states to legalize were, interestingly, the same ones that legalized marijuana, almost in the same chronological order. And now the red states are coming in. A couple interesting points. First, our legislators can't agree on what to eat for lunch. They disagree about everything. When they're voting on terramation in our states, because you got both sides, we're getting crazy majorities saying yes. They're saying yes for different reasons, but they both like it. So for your left-leaning crew, carbon capture, environmental protection, return to the earth, all great things. And for our conservative families, freedom. I have a home. I have a farm. My grandfather owned it. No one's going to tell me what to do. I want to return to it. And frankly, they're both completely right. So it's unbelievably bipartisan, and that's been so heartening.
That's awesome. Are you seeing a lot of nuance between the states? Because everything is different from state to state. I mean, you said we can't agree on what to eat for lunch, but are you concerned that from Washington to whatever state you're going to next, that there's going to be a lot of change and requirements that might modify the process a little bit?
It's a real pain. Funeral law is not federal. Funeral law, I'll start it again. Funeral law is not federal. Funeral law is actually state to state. And it's not just what dispositions are allowed, it's all the laws that are applicable in that area are state mandated. And that is an absolute dog's breakfast. It is also highly advantageous to the large companies that have burial and cremation mega corporations set throughout the country, because they know darn well that no one with the sweep of a pen can do anything to them. So it's a very defensible position. The hardest thing for us is not the legalization of terramation. The movement is on, ain't nobody going to stop it. And I mean that also in red states. I don't care. But they can make the laws so difficult to do that no one can do them. So, for example, New York has just legalized. New York requires that only cemeteries can do disposition. So in New York, they have to own retorts, right? The cremation machinery. And they also have to own, in this case, terramation facilities. One problem. In New York, cemeteries have to be nonprofit. So in New York, the only people who can do this is a nonprofit who's a cemetery, who doesn't have the technology or the know-how, and they're supposed to do it. Without taking the pun too far, we are dead in the water. I'm sorry, New York. What are we going to do about that? I don't know. I'm not a legislator. But that's where these types of real patchwork legislations become super, super problematic.
What state are you hoping to get into next? Is there a wish state?
There's a couple states I like. I mean, the holy grail is California. California is legalized, but it only enacts, or I should say comes effective in January 2027. So we have 3 years until California is ready. But that will be so freaking remarkable. Yeah, I cannot wait. Both in terms of the raw size of the state and the cultural, leanings of, the various Californians, up and down the coast. It's going to be incredible. We could open 12 facilities. Boom.
That's awesome, man. Can you talk about the process compared to conventional funeral burial? What would someone see as some of the major differences compared to a funeral versus a terramation? For the the whole like paint a picture for me, like how the whole from a family perspective.
Sure. So remember, you didn't know, I had this all wrong, right? So when I first designed the facility, my belief was we would build this incredibly technical structure, machinery, air movement. I mean, just really cutting edge science and technology that would rapidly transform, I should say, a human body into soil. Another assumption I made was that no family would ever set foot in our facility. You trust us, you give us your loved one, we transform them into soil and give that soil to you, and we're straight, just like we would at a crematorium. And that's profoundly wrong. So wrong, it's unbelievable. Families are piling in here. And so what happened as a result is our process, quickly to explain, is a 60 to 90 day process. It's we place a body in a vessel with alfalfa, straw, and sawdust wrapped around it at a 3-to-1 ratio. So a 200-pound body has 600 pounds of organics around it. The body, the microbes in our body, the things that transform the food we eat into energy, are miraculously also capable, designed to make that transformation of our body when we die back to the earth. We are hardwired to return. We take that natural microbial process and put it on hyperdrive. In our vessel, the body with almost no inputs, hardly any air, maybe a fifth of a hairdryer, rockets up to about 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The microbes completely transform the body in about 30, 45 days, depending on size. What's left is bone. We reduce that bone into small shards, just like they do in cremation. Put those bone shards back in the soil, let it sit for 1 more month, and give the soil back to our families. And that's how it works. So we knew that. What we didn't know is that families want to come here and sit with their person. When we place their person in the vessel, they want to fill the vessel with flowers and love letters and cheap scotch and pieces of wedding cake that have been sitting in the freezer for 20 years. They want to hold their hand. When they close the vessel, they cover the vessel in LED lights and Jewish prayer shawls and pictures and art. Kids will come and visit with a 10-piece of chicken, eat 8 pieces, leave 1 on top, We'll leave it for a day, but we're good. And so what we find is this incredibly passionate, beautiful human experience here. And I would say that that's far more important even than the environmental aspect. And I do deeply care about the environmental aspect. I just negated the human part because I think I was scared too and hadn't given it enough thought.
Was that a big pill to swallow and change the process that you had in your mind to allow the families to come in?
It wasn't a pill to swallow like, ooh, this is bitter, I don't want to do it. It was more like, holy freaking cow, do you believe this is happening? Like, it was so stunning. I'm just standing there, right? I mean, a woman loses her 15-year-old kid, and she's like, I want to put my child in that vessel with my hands. And I'm like, okay, right. And I can feel the chemical like running through my body. Like, I knew a couple things. I know that that's very seldom been done in this country. I'm afraid. First, for the living, does someone get hurt doing this? For our dead, oh my God, what if she drops her? That people, it just leaves us open to so many mistakes. And so it just required much more humility than I had. And the answer was, I don't know shit. I need to sit here and listen to these people, and I need to do it with an open head and open heart, and they know things. And someone who's lost their person, they have a clarity that's very, I think, right? You know that feeling when you lose your person and you have these worries and these concerns and this stuff, and it seems big. And then the world's quiet because none of that mattered. And you have a couple priorities and you're going to do that. And so our job was to listen, and that's what we did. And it wasn't bitter pill, but it was hard. How do we draw these lines? And so the answer to that was I was fired. They fired me. I was no longer permitted to make decisions on the floor. I'm 52 years old and I get scared. And my answer is no. And no is not acceptable. So, does it show love? Is it safe? Does it work? 3 rules. Anyone in the company with a brand new question, if those answers to their best of their knowledge is a yes, the answer is yes. If we screw it up and we're wrong, don't do it again. But if otherwise, we can do it. And that's led to miracles, right? So a mother will say, I want to take my son and I want to go to the back of the house where you guys normally work. And I want to be the one to cover my son with organics with my own hands. And of course, I'm like, no. And my team's like, get out. So the answer was yes. And that type of thing and lends to new ritual. So in that case, for example, that mother wanted it filmed. It went up on our TikTok and 53 million people saw that.
Wow.
So those types of things change the fabric of society. I'm just drafting behind these brilliant people in my company. I'm holding on for dear life. And I hope that I hope I can stay for the ride.
That says a lot about your character, and that you can step aside, listen to these families that are grieving, listen to your team, and change and be flexible in the ideas that you initially had for the company.
Yeah, I don't know. My team would probably differ with that. Maybe I'm making it a better story than it is. But yeah, this is very much like my team's 20 years younger than me. They're 10, 12 years in the funeral industry each. I mean, we got little Jake. The dude's 24. He's 8 years in the industry. Like, these kids know what they're doing. All I need to do is stand behind them, wave a towel and go, guys, do this. Big-hearted, go. And then knock down any barrier that gets in their way. So in a way, I have the easiest job in the company. All you have to do is just surround yourself with these freaking all-stars, which we have. Yeah.
Are you worried that, or concerned that being around death is going to impact you?
Oh, that ship has sailed, Big Stack.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I cried for the first 6 months, and I'm 50 years old. I came from the finance industry. Dude, we don't sit in meeting rooms and cry. Just thought you might want to know. Yeah, it breaks you up. And it also makes you realize, you being me, men, we're poorly equipped in our society to hold our mud. We're always talking about emotional women and crying women and, they're up and they're down. I look at the women in my company, and what they're doing is they're bending. They bend. when the world hits them hard, they acknowledge that it did. And then they bend, but they don't break. And men, we'll stand like this until we can't hold it no more and then go down. And so the thing I've had to learn that's been kind of interesting, can I try to grieve a little more like some of the women that I know? I'm not trying to paint a huge brush, but I am saying, man, they might be onto something. And to not hide my grief. And I don't want my team to either. So, funeral service, you don't cry. Really? Come on, dude. You stand there and a family comes in and they lost their child, man. And the child died of suicide and she's 15. Your heart is broken. We are human. Don't worry, cry. That's okay. No one wants to be sitting next to a robot. So I don't have those requirements of myself anymore because I couldn't. And because I couldn't ask it of myself, I couldn't ask it of my team. And that for me has been obviously a huge relief to do it. I mean, like yesterday, this beautiful team of funeral directors fly in from Minnesota. They bring us their person, and they love this guy, and they wanted to be here to care for him personally. So they put 2 funeral directors on the plane with them. And so they come into our facility, and it's a wild place. And their eyes are like, holy freaking smokes, right? And we're doing this amazing service with him. And all of a sudden, right, we have a rule, and the rule is never separate families. You ask. If they say no, okay, fine. But you know that feeling like, oh, those guys can't talk to those guys. Like, that ain't it. That ain't it. And so all of a sudden, in walks a man. Just lost his 28-year-old son. He walks over to the vessel right near where that service is. And he puts his head down on that vessel, and he cries on it 10 minutes, quietly. And the vessels are warm when we first start. They're because the body's so hot. And you could see this man had his arms around it and his head on top. And you realize, holy cow, this is a new paradigm. This is a new way of doing it. And all of the people involved aren't ashamed. Feels good. My greatest fear is dying alone and being alone. And hopefully that father yesterday didn't have to be that. And for them to see that man in that position, they walked out of the room too. That's okay. We're all right. Why? What? We shouldn't. So it's all been a journey.
Can you talk? Has there been an experience that has impacted you the most?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. We lost a kid. He was 17, and his mother came in. Family, but his mother. And everyone copes with grief differently, but his mother's solution was to be kinetic, to be hyper moving, to be talking and active and expressive. And she brought her son in, and she's like, that was the person that she covered her son's face with organics. And she just wanted to be part of everything, and she wasn't having any other possibility. And I remember as we were going through it, and he was in his vessel, all his friends were there. And I remember all of a sudden this kid with this giant afro walks up and hands the mother a pair of scissors, and she cut off all his hair and she put it, in the vessel. And then all his friends behind got in line too. And then everybody got in line. And I think that's organic, but that's also for those moments you feel like your heart is tied to other people's heart. And that was a gift.
That's deep, man. Woo, almost made me cry here a little bit.
Well, you can see me. Yeah, here I am.
Yeah, I think I told this to Bree, but I truly believe in the services that y'all are providing, and I love what the company's doing, but I don't know if I could handle doing that with kids. That's something different with children,
What's funny though? Not that that's funny, because it's not. Everyone's got their third rail, that thing that absolutely will blow them to pieces. Children will be yours. For Katie, she can care for families with lost children. She's phenomenal. Her hard one is when she sees an old woman or an old man that's lost their partner of 50 years, and she knows they're going to go home and eat a TV dinner for the next 10. It's interesting how we each have the thing that causes us great hardship. I run your chip, man. Children are just that thing for me. That's when what we do is we go, we got to be switching our team out. Okay, this is the person who died of suicide. That's not an easy thing for one of my team members. Not that it's easy for anyone, but it's real tough. All right, you're out, dude. We've got people. We got you. You do that one. Okay, kids, that's another. Suicide, another, right? And you got to be watching your people and watching yourself and be like, I need help. Like, I don't know if I can do that. And if I can be the one that shows the cracks, if I can be the one that goes, I need some help today, guys. I'm not, this isn't easy, right? Then someone else is like, yeah, well, I'm not easy tomorrow. So back at you, big boy. And I hope that works.
You talk about, the environmental aspect is really important. Can you mention or describe some of the benefits from an environmental standpoint?
It's funny, if we were having this podcast 2 years ago, this is all I'd have talked about. And of course, here we are, 1 hour in. What we do is so stunningly environmentally efficient, especially compared to our two current methodologies, burial and cremation. So cremation burns 30 gallons of fuel, about 450, 500 pounds of CO2 into the air. We are left with charred carbon, ground bone, which is useful to the earth, as a bucket full of sand. And that's considered our environmental option. Can you hear a loud noise in the back?
No.
Oh, good. For us, we are capable of transforming a body into soil at 90% more efficiency than cremation. What we don't know how to calculate and add into that is what we give the family back restarts the cycle of life. We're working on quantifying that. Whereas with cremation, of course, you are left with a bunch of charred bone. With burial, it's even more interesting because with that, man, how do you calculate this? Cemeteries that can never be used again for anything else. Endless amount of cement, rebar, hardwoods, bronze, all goes into the ground. And in fact, a lot of families buy a beautiful casket and stick it in the retort and burn it. Cost thousands of dollars for that casket. It's covered in thick varnish. Dude, it's such a train wreck. It is so unbelievable. And the reason we haven't come up with solutions is people are scared of death and dying. If this was food or cars or anything else, we'd have been after it. I mean, look at us. Look at it. Organic food, Tesla cars, right? And here we sit trying to figure out death. Ain't no accident.
It's 30 gallons of fuel for cremation?
And 500 pounds of CO2.
Wow. It's crazy.
Phenomenal. I was watching this really cool speech. Guy gets on stage and he goes, all right, ready? I'm going to give you the best and the worst. The best. A wolf eats you. Couldn't be better. They eat you. They digest you. They excrete you. It is 100% captured, the carbon. And while I admit you might not enjoy the wolf experience, it's as optimal for Mother Earth as you can imagine. And the diametric opposite of that is the cremation, the incineration of a human body. Straight up into the air, zero into the ground. Everything is greenhouse gas, nothing to give back to the earth. So when you think about wolves and cremation, yeah.
It would be interesting to test the soil, and I don't know if y'all have already done this, but test the soil organic matter in a cemetery.
Oh.
And then see what the soil biology looks like in a cemetery.
Yeah. Well, you know what I think is much more difficult in a cemetery than bodies going into the ground? Because, there's discussion about formaldehyde and whether it hurts the earth. The biggest problem with the cemetery is that they have to dump mountains of pesticides onto the grass to make it beautiful. Cemeteries, golf courses, these are beautiful manicured lawns. Those are a massive, massive problem. And cemeteries do obviously that in spades. So yeah, these are important things.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody from I forget what the name of the group, but they work with pollinators, and he was saying that neonicotinoids and other chemicals that are sprayed on golf courses are some of the most lethal, I guess, harmful to the environment that we have, and then it all runs off into the water, and then it contaminates the water. So yeah, I didn't even think about the chemicals that get sprayed on cemeteries. I didn't cross my mind.
Oh man, cemeteries, golf courses, they've got to look immaculate and manicured, and there is a massive price to pay for that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so exciting, right? Imagine we start building these huge memorial parks, and we're putting soil there, and there's trees and flowers and bees and open spaces, and now we're back to what humanity can use, and hopefully the earth is okay with too.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are big changes, man.
It's an exciting time because the whole regenerative farming movement is all about, like, one of the key pillars is soil health. And it's gaining more traction. Big companies are dedicating millions of dollars to regenerative agriculture. So your business fits in there perfectly with soil health, the carbon capture, all that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, here comes the movement. But at its root is radical honesty. We can't be stuck in a single mindset. We can't be a Democrat or a Republican or a Catholic. We've got to holistically, honestly look at the earth. Don't put, all these judgments about that guy or this guy. Listen, a lot of pesticides on the grass. Okay, it's not a great idea. Can we think of some alternatives? That's just a straight human question. We have to bring it down and depoliticize and ask honest, simple questions. And I think our answers will be our needs will be surprisingly similar. We want a nice earth for our children. We want clean air. And if we can get that discussion going, I think we've got a chance. Yeah. But we need to get the decision, this discussion in play, because man, we're behind.
Yeah. When are you coming to Texas?
Jeez, let me think. Did I come? Oh, I'll be in Austin. I'll be in Austin in 6 weeks.
Okay. What do you got a conference or what?
I do. I got a group of guys that I always meet with every November. Big group of guys from a business organization I belong to.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting, man. Well,
thank you, man.
Micah, I appreciate your time, and I'm like I said, I'm a huge fan of the company. I forget what article, what newspaper I read it in, and it made me reach out to Bree. But I follow y'all on all the social media, and I love what y'all do. So, how can people get in touch with y'all?
Our socials are out there. We got 700,000 people on TikTok. We've got emails in our company. You can go on to our website to write us. A lot of different ways to get us, and we're always delighted.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time, Micah, and I'll send y'all an email with the link when this comes out, and we'll plan it out whenever the Shark Tank episode comes out too.
Have fun. Should be interesting.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you, Micah. I appreciate your time, man.
All right, man. Be good.
Bye.